Now, excuse me, in the book of Revelations in chapter 13, it mentions about the Antichrist emerging from the ocean, a sea of humanity. And he comes out with all of the characteristics mentioned in the books of Daniel. We won't get into a Bible class here. After him comes another beast, because these are beasts, out of the sea of humanity, and he looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. And he's the Antichrist's PR man, sort of early 21st century terminology for the PR man, the promoter of the Duke of Doom, as we're calling him here. Now, he causes that everyone should worship the image of the Antichrist. He says that they should create an image of the Antichrist and place the image in the temple of God. Now, Mount Moriah is a mountain in Jerusalem, where the place where Melchizedek, long ago in the days of Abraham, was the king of Jerusalem. And Jesus, being of the tribe of Judah, could not be a priest according to the law, because you had to be a Levite of the tribe of Levi to be a priest, a high priest. But Jesus nevertheless is the high priest of all, but after the order of Melchizedek, so that one of the tribe of Judah is the supreme high priest. Now, people say, well, Jesus, of course, was a Jew. He was born of Jewish ancestry. But I hasten to add that he was only half Jewish. You know that. He's the Son of God, so only half Jew and half God. So, of course, he can be the high priest, but according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, Abraham was called to a test, and in this test he was instructed to offer up his only son as a sacrifice. Now, God was making an illustration here. He didn't hold Abraham to it, but Abraham was willing to do it, and Isaac was willing to go along with it. And just as he was about to offer Isaac up on that altar of stone on top of Mount Moriah, his hand was stayed by the angel of God that says, "Now we know that you would not withhold even your most precious possession, your son." So Abraham passed that test, but it was also a type. It was a type of Jesus, where it was mentioned that it shows that God would sacrifice his son, and it's the only sacrifice necessary, and God was going to do it. You see, in the pagan societies, they had human sacrifices all the time, and they still have them. They still have them. It's quite common, only they are able to occult it or hide it, right? They call it ritual sacrifice now. So they have their methods, believe me. And if they get caught, like in the 60s, this whole commune of them got caught offering human sacrifices regularly. Why, they have a lot of lawyers, a lot of people who will help them, and that whole commune of people got acquitted there on the grounds of insanity. And we know that it's almost impossible to proffer a defense based on insanity, but they quite easily got away with it. I know, because I remember sadly reading that article as a specialist, information specialist in the information office of temporary building number 7 near the Friendship Airport, the Army Material Command, back around 1967, 68, probably 1968 sometime. And my job was to come help my superiors go through the newspapers to look for public reactions to Army weapons systems being produced. And there was a lot of public reaction in those days against things the Army Material Command was testing and producing, such as nerve gas and other items. And I could go on and on about that. There's a lot of information that got buried because the newspapers were very quick to capitulate with the military-industrial complex. So, here I am not pointing blame at these guys, because you can imagine what kind of pressure they were under. And these institutions are not that powerful to resist the pressures that they find themselves subject to. So this is a big deal. The bottom line lies with each of you out there. The onus is really on you. In other words, you've got the responsibility to realize that you cannot completely trust in these institutions. If you're going to get current events, you better have a lot of references for it, and not just in one country or one nation. Or you better be very careful, because a lot of these guys are propagandists, and some of them, the propaganda is not that bad. But I won't get into that now. We've got to go on with this. I just have a few more minutes before we finish this one segment here. We're talking about the false prophet of the Antichrist, his PR man. And after they get that image in that temple that's built where Abraham almost offered up Isaac, and that is on top of a small mountain in Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem itself is a city that's built in a mountainous area. It's kind of like Mexico City, up there real high. A mountainous area that eventually cuts down after you get past Jerusalem and goes down, sinks to below sea level to the Dead Sea. But it's one of these mountain building things that's built up on the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, part and parcel of this rejection of the true Messiah is the urge to create another temple and start the daily animal sacrifice there. And in fact, they already have the temple built. It's sitting in warehouses in Jerusalem. It's prefabricated. But they're definitely not going to put that temple up until they have the security to do so. They're not going to build something that's going to get bombed. All they need to do is have a suicide bomber go up there with a small, low-yield atomic weapon in a suitcase, and there go trillions of dollars, or however much they sunk into it. So they're going to have such a climate of peace that they can build that temple, and the only way they're going to do that is when the Duke of Doom comes sweeping down from the north and conquers Israel, Egypt, and Dedan. It's mentioned in the Bible, which now we know to be Arabia. Now Saudi Arabia for a while. And everybody's going to say, well, nobody can beat this guy. Who can make war with him? And he goes ahead and has his pact of peace, but it's a false peace. Remember, he's the son of his father, the devil, the father of lies, and a murderer from the beginning. So as deceptive as it is, he eventually takes over, and he has to be in Jerusalem. He doesn't want to be. He wants to go back up north, but he has to be in Jerusalem. And when he does, his false prophet, his PR man, not only has them put the statue of the Antichrist in the temple, which was built by the people of God, the Jewish people, to as a dedication for their form of worship. So it's as Jesus says, it's the ultimate in blasphemy. And when you see that stand in a place where it ought not, and reader, understand what you're reading. When you read that in the scriptures, Matthew 24, then you better get out of there. If anybody's around that area of Jerusalem or in the areas of Israel, they need to head for the mountains. And I don't mean the Mount Moriah either, because there's going to be one wild ride for 3.5 years after that, and not 3.5 of the Julian calendar years we have now, but 3.5 of the 360-day Old Testament type calendar years they had, the lunar calendar. And as it says in another place, 3.5 orbits of the earth around the sun, a times, and half. So, well, now they also, now that they have that beast, the image of the beast, it should have life. So they are going to be able to have that thing so demon-possessed that it will actually come to life. And that's really going to wow a lot of these Trekkie, these Trekkie techies, these, I keep forgetting that, yeah, these nerds. And boy, they're going to be swept off their feet. They're going to be lining up in droves for the mark, which is going to come later. Well, not later. They've already started the technology for it. But they'll have that thing. And the Bible talks about in Revelation 13 how they should receive the mark in their hand and in their forehead. Now, receiving it in your forehead is even worse than anything. And that will be because the person who does that, if it's a chip, it's going to begin to start to perform a form of lobotomy, where the person is beginning to lose control of the part of his brain that actually makes decisions. And that may be actually what we think of as the conscience. Now, people thought that the stomach area, the solar plexus, was the seat of the soul. That may be. But there's also a part of the brain that makes you different from pure bestiality. And that is the frontal lobe of the brain. And we can prove it. Because when a person gets drunk, that's the part of the brain that begins to fade out. And finally, without that, they exhibit this type of human behavior, a very negative human behavior that is the evidence of what happens when that part of the mind is disconnected. And there is the evidence, there's the proof. Sometimes it's 98 proof. But whatever it is, the habitual drunk gets to be a very negative person. It is described as someone who is abusing alcohol and subject to alcoholism. Of course, there are different other parts of the brain that begin to disintegrate after prolonged alcoholism, which means that eventually the alcoholic is beyond treatment, except for the salvation of Jesus. So I won't get into that right now. But we're talking about people losing themselves. They're losing themselves. Now, how could that happen with a little chip in your forehead? If the chip penetrates through the skull and into the brain, And I think that's what it's going to do. They are going to be able to bypass the conscience, the part where the person can decide. You know, getting saved involves a decision. When a person responds to the conviction of his heart, to verses like, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life, whosoever believeth in Jesus. You see, then they decide they're going to receive Jesus into their life and into their heart. And they pray, for example, the sinner's prayer, Jesus, come into my heart. And they turn from their sins. This involves a decision. And now what the enemy wants to do most of all is to keep people from ever deciding that again. And what better way than a chip with an attitude, and I mean piercing right through and shorting out that frontal lobe. We'll get more into this in the next section.